Jean-Baptiste-Camille Corot occupies a singular place in 19th-century art as a bridge between classical landscape traditions and the atmospheric freedoms that prepared the way for Impressionism. Revered by contemporaries as Père Corot for both his artistic authority and personal generosity, he combined rigorous structure with lyrical softness, a commitment to on-the-spot observation with a studio practice aimed at distillation and memory. His career, unusually long and steadily evolving, shows a painter who learned his craft patiently, absorbed ideas from multiple generations, and then offered a unifying vision of nature that felt modern without discarding the past. Corot was born in Paris to prosperous, hard-working parents. His father dealt in fabrics, and his mother was a celebrated milliner whose shop attracted an elite clientele. Their success afforded the family security, but it also shaped the young Corot's early life in practical ways. Out of filial duty, he spent years apprenticed in the drapery trade, learning materials, textures, and the disciplined habits of a shop. He loathed the work, yet later acknowledged its subtle influence, an attentiveness to tonal harmonies and surfaces, not unlike the subtle gradations of cloth. Only in his mid-20s, after persistent pleading and a parental stipend, was he allowed to devote himself fully to painting. This late start became a defining prelude. Corot would be forever methodical, grateful for time, and suspicious of fashion. His formal training began under Achille Etna Micallin, and after Micallin's early death, under Jean-Victor Berthe, both heirs to the classical landscape lineage descending from Poussin and Claude Lorrain. From them, Corot inherited the value of underlying structure, compositions ordered by clear masses, measured perspectives, and a hierarchy of forms. He absorbed conventions of the historical landscape, foreground framing trees, middle distance paths or water, distant horizons where air seems to dissolve land into light. Yet even at this stage, he cared less for mythological narratives and more for the temper of place. Where the tradition often used landscape as a stage for allegory, Corot sought the poetry of weather, the character of morning and evening, and the quiet dignity of rural life. Crucial to his formation were his sojourns in Italy, beginning in the mid-1820s and repeated in the 1830s and 1840s. Italy provided majestic motifs and, more importantly, an education in clarity. In Rome and the surrounding countryside, he worked from life with remarkable discipline, producing small oil studies outdoors that recorded the exact fall of light and the tonal steps between sky, earth, and water. He would return to these studies for decades, not to copy them verbatim, but to remember their balance. The image of a day distilled into its essential values. Italy also strengthened his independence. Far from Paris's skirmishes over style, he learned to trust what he could see and feel, then to shape it into something at once observed and meditated. On returning to France, Corot navigated the institutional world with measured persistence. He participated in the Salon regularly, demonstrating respect for official channels without tailoring himself to their fashions. Recognition came gradually, medals, commissions, and ultimately honors from the state. But what mattered more was a growing circle of friends, younger painters, and dealers who understood the particularity of his vision. He was never a polemicist. His influence spread not through manifestos, but by example. In the forest of Fontainebleau and other rural sites, he painted alongside artists associated with the Barbizon School, sharing their devotion to plein-air work and to the truthful rendering of nature's moods. Yet he remained distinct, less interested in rugged naturalism than in a calm, musical order where the world seems to exhale. Two complementary practices defined his mature art. The first was the plein-air study, small, lucid panels painted directly before the motif. In these, he sought exact tonal relationships and the specific temperament of light at a given hour. He often kept these studies in the studio rather than selling them, treating them as a personal library of sensations. The second practice unfolded indoors, where he composed larger, more poetic landscapes that he sometimes called souvenirs, not literal transcriptions of a sight, but evocations shaped by memory, feeling, and a refined sense of harmony. In the studio works, the brush grows more veiled, forms are simplified, and a fine atmospheric haze unifies distances. The result can feel like a melody sustained across the canvas. Edges soften, tonal intervals close, and the scene seems suspended in an enduring present. Corot's palette and touch evolved steadily. Early clarity and bright Mediterranean light gradually yielded to a silvered tonality, cool greys, soft greens, muted blues, that would become emblematic. Far from monotonous, this refinement allowed him to modulate atmospheres with exquisite control. Mist lifting from water, foliage breathing as if stirred by an imperceptible breeze, skies that hold light like a vessel rather than blaze with spectacle. He liked to say that one must first establish the great values, the relationship between the principal masses of light and dark, and only then articulate details. This approach lent even the most intimate studies an architectural base, ensuring that sentiment never bled into sentimentality. Although known above all for landscapes, Corot also worked persistently with the human figure, nudes, dancers, and especially women in moments of quiet absorption. He treated these not as anecdotes, but as harmonies of contour, fabric, and light, using the figure to test the same principles of tonal unity he pursued outdoors. Drawing remained central to his discipline. He made countless charcoal and pencil studies, valuing the medium's capacity to establish structure before color and air dissolve edges. His draftsmanship, supple, economical, alert, supplied the skeleton upon which his modulated tones could rest. Corot's personality nourished his reputation as much as his canvases. Colleagues and students describe a man both humble and confident, unpretentious in habits, generous with money and advice, and faithful to friendships. The sobriquet Père Corot reflects more than age. It captures a gentle authority rooted in kindness. He supported younger artists financially, shared techniques freely, and intervened at crucial moments to help peers in hardship. This moral presence, rare in the combustible Paris art scene, contributed to the almost familial loyalty he inspired across generations. His relation to movements of his time was fluid. He never declared allegiance to a school, and later labels inadequately contain him. With the Barbizon painters, he shared a dedication to nature and a preference for rural subjects. With realists, he shared sincerity and observational discipline, though he distrusted the combative posture that sometimes accompanied realist rhetoric. The Impressionists, many of whom revered him, found in his outdoor studies a precursor to their own project, color as light, perception as experience, the painting as a record of time. Yet Corot was not an impressionist. He retained a core of classical order, a commitment to compositional poise and tonal hierarchy that kept the picture anchored. His art proposes a reconciliation, modern feeling grounded in old mastery. Professional success in his later decades did not blunt his appetite for work. He adhered to steady routines, rising early, walking to familiar sights, repeating motifs not from habit, but because each day's light offered a new proposition. He was wary of bravura and advised students to cultivate patience, restraint, and trust in major effects over minor ones. Dealers prized his paintings, and collectors, increasingly international, sought them for their serenity. Yet even as fame grew, he protected his privacy and sustained a fundamentally modest life, more studio than salon, more countryside than boulevard. The historical significance of Corot's practice lies partly in how it expanded the definition of finish. In the 18th century, finish often meant polish, hard edges, smooth surfaces, and the elimination of visible process. Corot helped shift taste toward a finish of effect, when the painting's unity of atmosphere and tone makes detail secondary. A picture could be finished if its feeling was complete, not merely its surfaces. This concept legitimized the small oil sketch as an autonomous work of art and, more broadly, authorized modern painters to let the trace of making remain visible as part of meaning. Equally consequential was his conception of memory in painting. For Corot, working from nature trained the eye, working from memory trained the imagination. The studio souvenir does not betray truth, it distills it, separating the essential from the accidental. This dialectic between direct perception and reflective shaping offered a path out of the binary that often divided his century, empiricism versus idealism. Corot proposed that a painter might honor both. His ethics of looking were inseparable from his metaphysics of light. He spoke of the envelope, that surrounding atmosphere that bathes objects and fuses them into a whole. To paint the envelope was to acknowledge the inseparability of things, the way air itself is an active participant in vision. This idea, while technical, also carries a quiet philosophy: the world as a continuous medium, not a collection of isolated items. Such a worldview, tender, receptive, and sober, suffuses his late works, where the humblest motifs seem dignified by belonging. Corot's long maturity coincided with tumultuous decades in France, political revolutions, social change, and industrialization. His art does not declaim on these upheavals, yet it responds with an ethic of steadiness. The rural spaces he painted were not fantasies but counterweights, places where time moved by weather and labor rather than by decree. There is no escapism here, only an insistence that attention to the ordinary is itself a moral act. In an age of noise, he cultivated quiet. Teaching, formal or informal, became a natural extension of this stance. Students and visitors to his studio encountered a pedagogue who emphasized constructive drawing, truthful values, and the subordination of effect to unity. He cautioned against overworking passages and encouraged the habit of stepping back, literally and figuratively, to judge relationships. Many artists carried his counsel into their own experiments, and even those who later shattered the tonal envelope learned from the clarity of his approach how to build and then transcend it. Corot died in 1875, by then a venerated figure. His passing marked not an end, but a diffusion. Museums and private collections enshrined his landscapes. His influence traveled with young painters across Europe and the Atlantic. His ideas about tonal unity, plein-air study, and the legitimacy of the sketch entered the common language of modern art. The market would eventually be so eager for his work that forgeries proliferated, an unfortunate tribute to his popularity and to the seeming simplicity of his surfaces, which in fact conceal subtle calibrations difficult to imitate. Today, Corot's legacy can be sensed in two intertwined ways. First, as a master of transition, he stands between the classical and the modern, not as a compromise, but as a synthesis that grants each its due. Looking at his art clarifies what the 19th century achieved in landscape, not just new subjects, but new forms of attentiveness. Second, as a model of character, his generosity, humility, and constancy remind us that artistic authority does not require stridency. The steadiness of his gaze, neither naive nor cynical, offers a kind of ethical weather in which many later artists learned to breathe. To write about Corot without analyzing specific works is to describe a temperament, disciplined yet receptive, orderly yet lyrical. He believed structure made freedom meaningful, that light was not merely illumination, but relationship, that memory could refine truth rather than distort it. His career shows how an artist might move slowly and still transform an era, how the patient pursuit of tonal harmony can change the way a culture understands vision itself. In this sense, Corot's art is less about places than about a way of seeing, one that treats the world with seriousness and with tenderness, and that finds, in the atmosphere between things, the space where painting becomes poetry.